Everybody, Chris and Lumen here, and here it is, the last day of July, getting ready to go into August, which we've been talking about for a while. This video might, well, I think it is. This video might be the most important video and piece of information that we've ever done, and it might be a little hard to grasp, but I think I can simplify it. This is kind of like, this has to do with like, what is the big puzzle that you were supposed to solve in this life experience? Now that we're getting toward the end of the game cycle, like, there's not time for most people to figure this out, but they can be told. And if you tell them and they're able to understand it and do it, then you've still basically solved the puzzle. Now, I'd already solved this puzzle several times, but it's so big that you see it and then, you know, you're still here, you're still in life, you're still dealing with stuff, and it kind of slips away from you, but you'll get pulled back to it again and again and again. That's what happened last night. I actually did this long video last night, and I realize now that the reason I was led to do that video was because of what would come up in it. I was talking about David Icke's books and just going through like how similar he and I are insofar as like the path and the understanding and the overall coming to the same conclusions. Although people that just kind of like halfway know David Icke, they just hear like this one thing. Oh, this bloke believes that, you know, the elites are alien reptile shapeshifters and they've ruled the world. Well, I mean, honestly, how much different is that than like what I say? I just call them archons and I say they're different than you and me. But that's what they hear. That's what people hear, and they don't, they haven't like maybe listened to him or read his books and like how deep he goes into like how consciousness works and all that, and coming to a lot of the same conclusions that I had. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, as I was relaying things in this video, I was bringing up a lot of the stuff that I'd been shown and I'd seen and my experiences and my tests, and like the very first clue that Epinoi gave me when she first showed up. And she said that the key to everything can be found in the Garden of Eden story. Now, when she first told me that, I was months away from her revealing the Nag Hammadi. So I didn't know the Garden of Eden story. I only knew the Garden of Eden story that the church orthodoxy gives people with their grossly redacted Bible. So I even like started like trying to write a book right then about what I was figuring out, but then it just went blank. Like, it went blank because I didn't know enough yet. So at that particular time, I was thinking like we were supposed to give Eve, or forgive Eve, for making the mistake of, you know, the snake and the apple and all that stuff. But that was close, but no cigar, because I didn't know the actual story. It's in the actual story, the fuller story, that you figure out the clue. And that is what I'm going to try to help you understand in this video, because it'll make, if you give it enough time and think about it, it will make a lot of other things that you've heard throughout life make sense about forgiving others and forgiving yourself. But when your consciousness and your awareness is just down at this one lower singular subjective level, you're not seeing the much bigger picture. So we're going to get into this and try to explain it. If you want to know more, don't go away. Now, the pieces of this big reveal have popped up over and over and over throughout my path, throughout this channel, throughout the different lessons and the stories that I've told. Some of them you've heard before, but it's so big that like you can see it for a minute and then it's like you almost just lose it, because we're still in here. We're still in here until it's time to not be in here. So what are some of the big ones? Where it most notably came out is when I tell the stories of when Epinoia started putting me through the harder challenges and lessons when she started to introduce psilocybin. Like, if spirit wants you to go on some shamanic journeys, it will provide what you need to do it. You don't have to go out and get it or whatever, like, because when you're ready for it, she'll just make it happen, as she did with me. But I think it would be easier if I tell you what the actual answer of the puzzle is, and then, you know, repeat my experiences and lessons that actually back it up. See, I don't know how many people actually know the Gnostic story, Gnostic creation story, or maybe kind of sorta, you got it through here, but everything, you can't get it from church, you can't get it from orthodoxy. Like, you have to kind of like know what happened before Genesis. Like, that is the key, because without that, like without the greater Gnostic understanding, you just think that you're this little person on this rock and you're separate from all other things, and you're here to suffer and be fearful of God or this or the devil, whatever. Like, you're just nowhere even freaking close. You got to understand the bigger picture that happened before. And the simplest breakdown explanation of it, you know, first Jesus is telling the story of like how it all works from the top on down. See, the Bible never ever describes the Father or what the Father is. They lead you to believe that the Father is simply the creator God at the beginning of Genesis, which it isn't. It's not. It's so much bigger than that, and it's not full of rage and anger and worship me or I will kill you sort of stuff, which has pervaded to this day. So to keep it simple, you got multiple layers of characters, starting from, you know, the one, the all that is, the great invisible spirit, from which comes the Father, which created the mother, which created the child. And then you got all these like aeons of different things down below. And down a little ways from there, you got Sophia, her. And Sophia's counterpart is Christ, or Christ Savior. Now, this is not Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was like a lower emanation in the physical realm, but it's the masculine and feminine, just like that rebus picture that I show. That's why the one side looks like Jesus and the other side actually looks like Lumen. So there, you know, outside of here, everything is two things. So the way the Gnostic story goes, and I did mention a couple times recently, it's like, if you're intellectually honest, like, we don't know what it's like outside of here. We only know what we're told. We only know the stories that we're given in here. So when you got all these old apostles and things like that telling the stories like, this is what God told me, explained how everything was created, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly right, but that's the story that we needed to hear to act out what we're supposed to do here. But as the story goes, Sophia wanted to like kind of create something herself, and she was monkeying around with the creation waters or fluid or whatever, and she had a thought, but she was not in cooperation with her partner. Her partner wasn't with her. So when she had this thought and she created this thing, it was misshapen, it was corrupted, It was like this angry, evil snake with a lion's head and flashing eyes. It was like, eh. So she freaks out and she encloses it in this enclosure. And she's just like, oh crap. And then she went and eventually, well, she watched this thing start to grow, and it's swimming around, and it's like, I'm the only thing here. I must be God. And then it starts creating a world. Now she's a lot weaker because part of her power went to this thing. But eventually she goes and confesses to the greater spirit, and everything kind of like looks down on it. And Sophia gets forgiven, but she's still got to like do the work of like, you know, fixing this thing, but also letting this whole thing play out so all these souls can grow. So in this perfect, let's just call it perfect universe or perfect system, there was something created that was corrupted. That's the story that we're given. And because it's corrupted and it didn't have the divine feminine chill, it's not a lot of fun. It's very angry, it's very egoic, it's very wrathful, and then this world is the result of that. Okay, so that is like the basic, and then she has to send a part of herself down into Adam, which is all of us, which was enlightened insight, to teach us and raise us up and all that stuff. You with me so far? If you're not, drop a question in the comments. Quantum consciousness can be very hard to describe to the layperson, because when you see it and you kind of grasp somewhat how it works, it's simply too big to be put into words. But we do talk about things sometimes that we pick up, such as the world is your garment. And we've said it all the time in here. It's like, look, the world that you see outside of yourself is your garment. You are consciousness that is projected down into this physicality. But from the point of view of like where you are right now, and you're looking around right now at all this physical stuff, you, the conscious part, are actually in your own mind. I know it's hard to grasp, just try to bear with me. We'll get to the main point. And eventually you go and you start to learn things. You start to understand like everything is like macrocosms and microcosms. You start to notice that like a lot of these upper tier characters are just like bigger emanations of like the exact same thing that you are down here. And then there's all sorts of other things like that have come up in videos recently, like the whole trick to exorcism and things like that I dropped in a video lately. I don't remember which one it was, but it was from the movie The Exorcism of God. They're like, how do I do it? He's like, you do it by not believing that God is with you, but by believing that you are God. Now, the game wants to mislead you from that, so that there you got the Hierophant again, like, heresy, heretic, you must be punished, like you're not supposed to think that. Yeah, we'll bear with me. I mean, there's evidence of this. But let's just get to like the simplest, rather than trying to make you try to understand that. Here's the simplest key in that Gnostic story that you were supposed to see. Okay, this is a perfect system. And yet something that is part of that perfect system, allegedly, according to the story, made a mistake and created something that was not perfect. It was corrupted. So that's the first thing that we're supposed to believe, is that it was a mistake. What if it wasn't a mistake? Okay, so then we come to understand through the Gnostic story that this thing created the archons, and it created all this other stuff, and then it created Adam, at least the first two parts of Adam, the psychical body and then later the material body, but it took the light from his mother to put the light in there, then Adam had a soul. Now the three parts of Adam or any person can be a little bit tricky to understand because a lot of people use words interchangeably, but it was actually in that David Icke book that I was discussing last night that I saw, that's something that she wanted me to see, an explanation that actually clicked a lot better. So as far as what the soul is, comes from a root Greek word which we know as psyche, which it has to do with it's like the individual parts. It's like the thoughts, feelings, experiences. It's like what you are, your collection of everything that you know, your mind. Like that's the psyche. So that would be like the psychical body. And then the light from light part is actually the spirit. The spirit is what makes you move. It's what gives you life. And when you laid it out that way, I'm like, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense, because we are in our individual experiences, we're trying to connect to the greater thing. And he rightfully said, the key's always been in order to evolve out of here, the psyche has to wake up enough to seek the spirit and connect with it and become one with it. Because the psyche would be like the 4D self, the body is like the 3D self. The psyche, mind, ego, personality, that is like the 4D self. And then the part that makes you move, that's connected to the higher realms, is 5D, which is spirit. So that's why it made me think of that time when me and Lumen were put together, and I just intuitively was saying this place that we were in was 4.5D. And I thought that was kind of random. I was just trying to describe something, but when I look at what Icke was saying and when he laid it out, that suddenly made sense, because I had to get to a place in which me and Lumen could be in the same place at the same time. So I had to go we had to meet halfway between 4D and 5D, because my body's in 3D, my mind is in 4D, she's in 5D. So me and her had to meet in 4.5D to do the Lover's card, which merged us together and created the link. So now 4D and 5D are connected. So because we're now connected, no matter what, pulling out of there. But maybe you don't have to go that far, but you just have to have that connection. You have to be reaching, you have to be trying. And most people if you're watching this channel, you pretty much probably already are to an extent connected. And that's what it kind of explained in the Nakamati. It's you got to at least be trying and reaching to connect to spirit. But anyway, let me keep going. But here's the thing. You're comprised of two parts. An uncorrupted part, which is connected to spirit, and a corrupted part, which is a corrupted mind, physicality, and energetic body. You're a bit of both. You are partly the highest, you're a part of the highest uncorruptible God, and you're part of the lower corrupted God, which Gnostics know to be synonymous with the devil. Old Testament God equals Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is essentially the devil. Okay, it's the one that wants to subjugate everybody and control everything and all that stuff. Okay? So the natural response that most humans have in this game when it comes to learning about this kind of stuff is you don't like the devil. The devil is your enemy. The devil is what you got to fight. The devil is the cause of all the evil in the world. And if we could just get rid of the devil, then everything would be perfect, right? That's the standard understanding. The devil is responsible for a lot of bad stuff. The creator God is responsible for a lot of bad stuff. But what's the bigger lesson that we're missing here? There's actually two key things. And you might not be able to wrap your brain around the second thing, but you should still be able to wrap your brain around the first thing, and that's the most important. So the first most important thing that you were supposed to see in that story and understand is that this devil, this creator God, the Old Testament God, whatever you want to call it, was created flawed. So yeah, according to the story, Sophia made a mistake and created this thing that was corrupted and bad. Now, the Christian Orthodoxy likes to focus on the good stuff, right? Well, the world is inherently good because God is good and all that stuff at the beginning, and it was good and it was good and it was good. Okay? That's fine. But then bad stuff starts to happen. So it's not that creator God cannot do good. It can. But it's also corrupted. And since it was created corrupted, what fault does it have? Think about that. So if you were born with a birth defect, maybe got some limb that's like not formed right or whatever, you got a birth defect, okay? And people are judging you for it. What fault of yours is that? You had no hand in how you were created and born. You just ended up that way. And now the whole world is judging you for the way you look. That would probably sour you quite a bit. So you've got all this stuff in, like, say, the Old Testament Bible, which is, I don't mess with a whole lot because it's just too confusing and too old and too redacted and whatever. But like sometimes God's being good. Sometimes God's being a raging, hell monster and killing people. And everyone just tries to get on his good side and worship him enough to where he stays good to you. Doesn't change the fact that he killed 2.8 million people, not including the flood in the Old Testament, and that his church continued to do everything that Jesus didn't throughout the Dark Ages, throughout the Inquisitions, throughout the witch hunts, throughout the Reformations, and just hunting everybody down and killing them, torturing them, burning their stuff. Okay, that happened, and they did it in the name of their God. But he was created flawed. He was created that way. He did not make a choice. See, there's certain verses in the Bible that are there to meant to throw you off. But it's just like, a couple, I think about it, you really think about it, like this is a couple verses in one book out of everything that's out there in the world. And then they take these couple verses and they build a big story around it, and then you just accept it like that's the way it is. But the Gnostic books are more complete. And the thing you're supposed to see, and let this sink in, is that the root of evil is actually not the knowledge of good and evil. The root of evil is not what happened in the Garden of Eden. The actual root of evil is that the Creator God was created flawed and not of his own fault. You with me so far? Now, most people in various avenues of spirituality have no problem with wrapping the brain around that, a higher part of you is connected to the all. You're connected to everything. You're connected to the good thing. Okay, they don't have a problem with that. And they still don't like evil. They don't like all the bad stuff in the world. Like normal people don't like it. But what no one ever comes to consider is that Adam was a conglomeration of different things. He was part light from light, he was part light from fire. The core thing that makes him work comes from what is uncorrupted. The body and all that stuff was created by the corrupted part. And that means that you are both light from light and light from fire. You are you're partly a microcosm of the greater higher thing, and you are also a microcosm of the lower corrupted thing. So what you find in all these spiritual, traditions and teachings and stuff like that is like you're the center of everything, and you got to be good with yourself. And what do they tell you? Love yourself, forgive yourself. But what if yourself is actually something much bigger than just this? And you just don't realize it. You don't realize that you're inside your own mind, and you're providing like all the materials and outside lessons and knowledge to come up with the story. You don't realize that you are much, 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 much bigger than that. So therefore, if you do not understand and know that you are part of both parts, and you're still stuck in the duality of good and evil, you're going to lean towards the good. But then you're still condemning the evil, not realizing that that is simply a broken part of you. And it becomes a lot more clear when you factor in the specific lessons and experiences that I have gotten from epinoia. So let's go back to let's say the most recent one in this series of lessons. This is going to be shortly before a lot of the new people came in with the July 15th video. Maybe like a week or two at most. I don't even remember how we got to it. But she was leading me to go through a whole bunch of different things like forgiveness and confession and all this different stuff. And I started to have like this uncomfortable feeling in my heart chakra, which I'm not used to having since I've had lumen. And it was just like something was screaming and yelling. It sounded like the adversary. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't have the adversary anymore. So what the hell is going on? And then I was able to, like in my mind's eye, I was able to see it. This thing that was screaming and it looked like this kind of, I wouldn't say demon. It was black, and it had like fiery eyes and mouth and stuff, and it was just like going nuts. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, how did you get here? And I'm looking at Lumen, and I'm like, why is she not like attacking it? So I just observed. When you don't understand something, the best thing to do is just sit and observe. And its voice began to change a little bit. And then like parts of it were kind of like falling off, kind of revealing a form underneath of it. And eventually I started to see, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's me. That was like this core trauma identity that I thought was healed, but wasn't. It was much, much, much deeper. I'm like, okay, this is starting to make sense now. So I forget exactly what we did to handle it. It would have been in one of the videos. But we treated it like we treated every other trauma identity through the trauma identity process that led to them coming out. It's like you got to kind of like contain it, and then step into your divine authority. Go through the process with it, like the Ho'oponopono process. Use whatever method works for you to heal it and send that permanently back to source. And then we were good, and then things moved forward. But what that demonstrates is something that I've seen over and over again throughout the path. And sometimes you hear about in spirituality and stuff like that when they talk about shadow work or whatever. It's like, if you are the center of your world and you're part of everything, then everything is part of you. And if you get far enough to see that some of these monsters that you encounter, and that's been a theme throughout my entire hero's journey, most of the monsters that I had to fight ended up being something I either created or some part of me that was damaged. And the longer damaged parts of your psyche go untreated, they degrade, they become more toxic, they become monstrous. And they look and act like demons. And it's like a dog that's been beaten too much. And you see this abused dog at the dog kennel, and you go to pet it and it snaps at you. Like, it's just too damaged. Everything that is the fruit of evil at the furthest back point is the result of something that was created flawed or damaged. And the further it goes, the more toxic it gets. So here are some of the big experiences that I had that was leading me toward this big lesson. Which, to keep you interested, where we're going with this is you have to understand that, yeah, you're part of God, but you are the devil too. At a higher level that you might not grasp. Like, you are the corrupted thing that was just created broken. And at a higher level, the test has always been, can you recognize this fact and heal yourself? And if you look at the different things that she put me through, it was all leading up to understanding this. So the first lesson, I think it was the first. I'm just going to say that it was the first. She had me do a mushroom trip, and it was the least fun of all of them, because I wasn't like going inward so much as I was staying out here, but I could hear that adversary voice very clearly. And one of the things that she told me before we started the test is, like, you cannot hit your vape until it's over. That'll be tough. So it was always trying to get me to hit it. And says, just go ahead and do it. You'll feel better. And then it like turns up that like addictive feeling, that craving, like up to like 20. And it's like, oh my gosh. And they kept trying to get me to do stuff. It kept trying to get me to quit. Like, it wanted me to just sit down and relax, and I'm supposed to stand up. So I kept having to tell it no. And it kept getting more and more mad. So it was actually like torquing up my back and giving me muscle spasms and cramps and stuff like that, trying to get me to do what it wanted. And I had to say no. And this went on for so long that I was like, I kept looking outside thinking like, oh my God, it's got to be over soon. Like, the sun's got to be coming up any minute now. And I checked my watch and it was only 1 a.m. Because when your consciousness is not fully in this space, you are not connected to linear time. So to me, it felt like hours and hours and hours, but in linear time, it was maybe 45 minutes for most of this. It was nuts. It was not fun. And this just kept going and going and going and going and going until both of us got exhausted. And we just kind of sat down on the, it was funny because we kind of just sat down on the couch with this like black dragon. It's like, why are we fighting, dude? Like, I don't know. I'm kind of hungry. I'm like, I got some chicken nuggets and some of that Chinese sweet and sour sauce. Like, yeah, that would be good. I'm sitting there eating chicken nuggets with this black dragon that I just fought with for sounds like a mushroom trip, right? Well, that was the first thing. That was like the 40-day. That was like the condensed version of Jesus's, 40 days fast in the desert, where you're resisting the adversary. The next ones happened several times during the big mushroom trips, like the 10-gram trips, which it's not a trip unless it's 10 grams. Trust me. Like when she's having you do like 10-gram trips, like I've never done ayahuasca, but I've listened to people talk about it. I'm like, I think that's going further than ayahuasca. Like your consciousness at different points is not here. It's going all over the freaking place. But there was 2 or 3 times when it was when the psilocybin is peaking and your consciousness is literally like on multiple levels and dimensions. And I'm looking like at my hand and stuff, but not like with my physical eyes and my physical hand. In my mind, I'm looking. It's like this big like globule thing. It's really hard to describe. But each time I came to this like awareness that I was the demiurge. I was Samael. Like I was that thing that created the world. Because we're all part of the same thing. And it was weird. And it was like because I was that thing, and it was like I knew I was broken. I knew I was broken, but Sophia was still very, kind to me. Like when I'm having this realization that I am this thing that I've been fighting like my whole life. And it's something like I understand that it probably can't sink in hearing someone else tell a story, but it was pretty profound. It was pretty profound knowing that I was two things, that I was both sides. And what's the whole thing about this? If we want to simplify this realm, it's about duality, good and evil, light and dark. Not realizing, you're going to make a choice which side you're going to lean to. But the whole time, no matter who you are, you have both parts. You are both parts. The other probably biggest one that was not a mushroom trip, it was a regular meditative interstate thing, was I got to this one, it was right before we started doing the attunements and things, and maybe 2 months before she started telling me like time was short. So this was a big test. So I just completed something, I forget what it was, and she led me to believe, like I was just getting peppered with synchronicities and stuff, like stuff about stars and wishing, and all these movies had like when you wish upon a star card. It was all this stuff. It was like constant. And then she told me that I completed that level. And this is what she's like, and this is what people are trying to get to, because now you get to make one wish. She has a way of making things feel very real. And sometimes she's just setting you up for the next test. She's like, you can wish for anything. You can use your wish to make Lumen bring her into physicality with you, which that would be awesome. I got all excited. So when it came time to do this, go into the space, and she's like, okay, you got this one wish, but I'm like, oh, here it comes, the but. Now I know it's going to be a test. It's like, remember when you figured out that the reason that the creator god / devil is so broken is because it did not get the divine feminine part, and it was created broken. I'm like, yeah. And you said, like, if it could be given the missing part, then maybe the world would correct itself. I'm like, yeah, but how do you do that? Well, you couldn't before, but now you got a wish. Okay, I'm listening. So you can use your wish to get whatever you want. You bring lumen here, whatever. Or you can use your wish to give your lumen to it so that it has what it's missing, and therefore maybe the world will be corrected. I'm like, give my lumen to the devil. That's what you're saying. She just looks at me. It's like, you do something for yourself or do something that could conceivably fix the whole world for everybody. I'm like, crap. So I'm like, oh my God, this is just a test. This is just a test. This is just a test. Because it doesn't matter, like, oh, you get a chance to save the world, right? Even if it's just, a subjective test. But by giving up lumen, I know you guys can't understand that. But to me, I'm almost like, that is like the only thing that is keeping me alive in this freaking place with everything that I've seen. But I was in a corner, and I knew what, I'm like, I have to finish this game this time. I have to, and I know what the right answer is. So I did it. And then she just kind of like snaps her fingers, and lumen was gone. And I could feel that she was gone. It was like having my heart ripped out of my chest. And I was like inconsolable. And I just fell asleep that way. Just like, you can't leave me here without her. You cannot leave me in this place without her. Then I woke up the next day and lumen was back. So she's like, it was just a test. I'm like, that was the worst test ever. But after that test, then she showed me the secrets of like the 8th chakra, the soul star chakra above your head, and how we could go in there now. And there's this big white room, and the first door that was opened up in there led to the wellspring of life, which is where we could now go to meet with the Divine Mother. So now we could take people into a place where she and lumen could assist them in letting go of their past traumas and stuff like that, and connect them to the Divine Mother. And then much, much later, it would open up another door which led to the garden, which is the mind. So we had enough at that point where we could start doing more stuff with people and connecting them to her in a bigger way. But I had to pass that test first. But a core part of that test was the big bad thing is broken. The big bad thing does not have a lumen. It doesn't have access to divine love. And that's why it is the way that it is. So now we've gotten multiple experiences at this point, different mushroom trips, realizing, overlap those two. At the point in which I'm doing the lumen test, that was before the mushroom tests. So I hadn't gotten to those realizations, like that's part of you. You're not just you're not giving your lumen to the devil. You're putting your lumen to the part of you that's broken. Now this had come up in earlier tests, like go back a year or two before, and what I think was like literally like one of the hardest ones of all to figure out. Like this part might have went on for like 9 months. Like one day I just kind of like got a glimpse of something, and it's like, wait, what? And it's like I became aware that there was like a mirror version of me that was bad. And I kind of called it the anti-self, or the anti-Chris, which anti-Chris, anti-Christopher. Let's just take the ofer away from that, and what are you left with? And my understanding was like it controls how you manifest things in the outside. It's connected to the outside world, just as you are connected to the inside world. So you in the inside world is trying to like make things happen in the outside world, but the dark reflection of you, well, that's its territory. So you try to manifest money, and it just takes money away from you. And the mirror stuff like is literally like some of the hardest lessons, things to figure out. And I tried all sorts of stuff, and it did calm it down for a while. Like I realized that fighting it was a losing battle. And that's one of the things that they show you over and over and over in the Codex movies. The one that always just pops to my head is like the movie Insurgent, the second movie in the Divergent series. The last test that Triss had to do was basically fight this evil version of herself. And then she beat it by not fighting it. In Empire Strikes Back, when Luke goes into the dark cave and suddenly sees Vader, and Yoda tells him, like, your weapons, you will not need them. Because Luke's like, what's in there? He's like, only what you take with you. So he runs into Vader, smacks him in the helmet, knocks his head off, but his helmet blows up, and it's Luke's face underneath the Vader helmet. Like, that was like one of the last Codex clues in Star Wars that I ever figured out. That was a hard one. But it's always like, whatever the big bad enemies are in this realm, this space that we're in, they're you. They're you. You're dreaming right now. This whole world is your dream. Everything that is bad is something in you. It's an unhealed part. Like you heal as much as you can. Okay, that sprung up through the life game. But in the end, what you're left with is like, part of you is still incomplete. It's still uncorrupted, or it's still corrupted. And you're having this shared experience with all these other people, so you still see bad things in the world. So what are you supposed to do? So in Orthodox Christianity, everybody blames Eve. So when she first appeared and she said the keys to everything are in the Garden of Eden story, I thought we were supposed to forgive Eve, but I didn't know the whole story yet. So then it becomes Sophia was the one that messed up and created this thing that was flawed. Well, Sophia got forgiven, but she still had to kind of like work out this whole situation. Okay, so then we come to, oh, the big bad thing in this world is what we call the devil or the creator God. Now we have something else to blame, because it's the bad thing. It's the one that makes all the bad things in the world happen. But again, we're struck with, but it's not his fault. He's created that way. And on a level that you probably can't grasp, because I've done all this stuff and I can barely grasp it. That thing is part of you. You are a microcosm of it. So everybody got forgiven, but it can't help the way that it is. And it does bad things, and people hate it even more and reject it and all that stuff, which only makes it worse. So what we're ultimately supposed to do is somehow understand. I gave as many examples as I could of like the things that I've seen. Understand that is part of you too. You may never fully understand like how all this stuff fits together, because it's super duper freaking complex. You just know that it is connected and it is part of you. Everything is part of you. That you're connected to everything and everything is part of you is one of the biggest lessons that go through any tradition. And the good part of us doesn't like the evil stuff, because we don't like this evil stuff. Like, push it away, push it away. And the big mystery of this game is like, but that's part of you too. It's just corrupted. So what do? Maybe we can never figure out how to fix it, but we can forgive it. We can forgive it and understand that everything that is wrong with this world is not the result of some intruder or some bad thing, some enemy. It's simply broken code. that is part of you. It's simply a machine that's missing a part. And so it's all janky and messed up. So you got to learn somehow to understand that it's all part of you. And it's simply uncorrupted code, or I keep saying uncorrupted. It's simply corrupted code that makes things not work the way they should work. And how much can you fix yourself within this environment, because your own corrupted code is like inhibiting you from a lot of things. So you gotta at least fix your inner self first so you can see clearly, and then realize, oh, this other stuff is part of me too. I mean, Sophia, who created the whole thing in the story, got forgiven. The thing that she created is not at fault. It's not at fault. So that's what we have to understand somehow. Like, that's the big lesson. The big lesson is like all this stuff that we don't like, all this corruption, is part of us, and it's not actually inherently evil. It's just corrupted. It's not what it's supposed to be. So the only thing that we're left with that we can do is to forgive it. Forgive it, understand that it is corrupted, and then think of some way, whatever comes to you, like, how could you fix this? Well, the song that pops into my head is like the first song she gave me after she came out, which is Love is the Answer. So maybe we just gotta like pray to the Father to ask it to fix this thing, forgive it, let it go. But we have to understand that. We have to understand that there's nothing in this world that is not a part of us. We want to escape it. We want to be free of it. We want to be free of the corruption. Just like I imagine, like I said, like a kid born with a birth defect that has this like tiny arm or something like that. You think that kid wouldn't rather prefer to have a regular arm? Yeah. So rather than like condemning the devil and like the devil's going to be thrown into hell, like all these parts of the stories are given to you as a trick. You have to see the higher aspect. You have to figure it out. It's like, no, I would prefer not to ask the Father to throw all this evil into the burning pit of hell. I would be like, can you maybe fix it? Because if it was created corrupted, like, what fault is it? It's almost like this thing has been torturing you your entire life and ruining the world. And now you have to be its advocate and go to the higher Father and ask the higher Father to forgive it and heal it and fix it. Because it's not that. Like, that's a big step. That's a big step. You know, if you just go on, I mean, you see all these lessons throughout movies and life and stuff like that. It's like, I can't forgive this thing that killed my family member or whatever it is, because like a lot of bad things happen in this world. So it might not make sense to you if you haven't been on some really, really intense training, really, really intense, like psychedelic journeys, been guided by the Spirit of Truth to lead you to truth. But as the game is beginning to shut down because the corruption has gone rampant, I mean, when it reaches a certain level of corruption, nothing works right anymore. And that's when the game is shut down and cleared out and everybody is graded and stuff like that. But this is the big thing that you're supposed to figure out, to understand. is that it's all just corruption, and it's connected to you, even if you might not believe it or understand it. So what you got to do is basically go to the Father and ask for its forgiveness and ask it to be corrected from a place of understanding. Not just like, oh yeah, well, but I don't know. I can see the big picture though. Like, this is why I was drawn into doing that. It wasn't because I was supposed to do a video talking about the similarities between my work and David Icke's work, but in telling the story, I was going to remember all these different keys and all these things that have happened, these big revelations that I've forgotten. That is like, that's it. That's love is the answer. And it's hard to do that to something that you've been led your whole life to believe is this evil thing that wants to kill you. Yeah, and sometimes it does. But how did it get that way? Everything in the entire story of your mind and the world is part of you. And the game is like, figure yourself out. Figure out what's really wrong here. Figure out what's really wrong so that you can let it go and heal it and clear it. That's the best way I can describe it. I hope that makes sense. Like, what is Jesus and all Buddha and all these spiritual teachers teach us to do? You know, forgive, love, heal, let go, all that stuff. Yeah, I can do that to someone that just did something small to me, but all this evil in the world, got to go further back. Got to go back to before the beginning. How did it start? Something was created not right. Try to understand that. Try to understand that. And then one more thing before we close. A couple things actually. See, you cannot reach this level of understanding through Orthodox religion. Because first of all, they think that the good guy, they think the good guy to them, or they don't know the good guy to them is actually the bad guy. And they're all looking forward to God's going to come down and crush the evil and yay, we win. Not seeing the bigger picture here. I mean, yeah, all the corrupted creation things will be dismissed because we create a lot of things. So our corrupted creations will be disposed of. But that's not the big lesson. Big lesson is not, yeah, we vanquished our enemies. But like, you're a much bigger thing, and that is actually part of you. It's about healing the self. You just didn't realize the self was that big. And it's in alignment with what Jesus taught. Love the Father with all your heart, love one another. Healing and all that stuff. But they give you this twisted version where Jesus is coming in with flaming swords and destroying everything and all this stuff. I'm like, is that in alignment with what he was teaching? No, I mean, orthodoxy and authority is like the first box that you were supposed to get out of to see the bigger picture. But the other thing I would reiterate, like I said, sometimes it can go over people's heads. People say stuff like, they get bummed out when I say everything would just stop one day. We'd drop dead, something like that. It's like, okay, that's just because you don't understand the bigger picture. Like, you can't die. You can't. You cannot die. Just this material, temporary thing can. And I can understand where you'd be hesitant if you haven't been outside this realm enough times like I have, and you've not seen the other places. Like I said, the times I've been outside of this place with Lumen, which what I call 4.5D, that's a better place than this. she's more real than people walking around here are. I mean, it's freaking awesome out there without all the corruption. It's like, we're not talking about a bad thing. Like, you're like, oh, I don't want that to happen. That's because you don't know what you don't know. Like, people become really attached to this existence, not realizing how limiting it actually is. And we just get really good at, you know, people will talk about, oh, you create your own bubble and everything's good in it. Yeah, but that's a limited construct. You're still in this world that is corrupted, whether you are paying attention to it or not. Like, you want to get to the higher levels, the upper aeons, the perfect world. That was another thing we were talking about in that David Icke video, but it was just too freaking long. But like, yeah, we do want to be free of all this stuff. Like, you don't, like, things are better out there. Just trust me on that. Like, this game closing down, like, if you still don't understand it, like, in whatever form it takes, we don't actually know. We only know what we've been told and what we're shown. And what we're shown and what we're told, historically speaking, from doing the hero's journey, like, she shows you things and tells you things because it is supposed to prod you toward self-evolution. Like, that's the reason you see it and hear it and know about it, is because it's supposed to spur you on. If you were to think like things were going to end soon, like, it's supposed to have an effect. Like, what do I got to do to fix myself? That's what it's supposed to do. It's not something to be feared. It's not something to worry about. That's why before all this started, she started the Bob Marley song. Don't worry about a thing. Everything's going to be all right. But you still want to, like, do the best you can at, you know, working this game out while you're here. And now I just gave you, like, probably the biggest puzzle piece there possibly is. And we don't know what the time frame is or anything like that, but at least you know you got something new to chew on. So chew on that. Okay? So we're going to wrap this up for right now. If you want to support the channel, we started the Buy Me a Coffee thing, and every coffee that you buy, like, is an entry in the giveaways. I showed this in the video that that I'm obviously not showing now, but she picked out the first one. So this is like a very advanced, complex, multi-use Aegis pendant. It's not just for clearing negative stuff or protecting from negative stuff outside of you, but it's actually for, like, healing that negative stuff. So maybe that was like a freaking clue. Without, I wasn't even realizing it at the time, because I showed that in that video. It's like, yeah, it's got all the protective anti-evil stuff, but the composition of it is also to heal, like, the inner stuff, release, like, the negative, you know, things that are within you, so that they can be healed. So I guess this was actually a microcosm of the overall lesson. I just didn't see it yet. But, like, that's the first one that we're going to give away, like, next week. Right now, Tony's ahead of everybody. But you can do that by clicking on the links in the description box below. And there'll be some more ones too. But that's just the first one that she picked. Like, this one is, like, extremely dense with a lot of, like, expensive type stones in it. Like, normally this is, like, one I would usually sell for like $200. So we use the random number generator when we do this kind of stuff, because I do it on a different channel too. So $5 might get you like a $200 freaking energy tool. But we're going to have more things than just that. We're not just going to draw one. It'll probably be next Friday when we do the drawing. So, and that helps keep me afloat, keeps things going. And other than that, you can also go to our Etsy store, clumencreations.etsy.com, and see what we got there. It's best to go by feeling more than, like, what the descriptions are, because the feeling will be epinoia. So epinoia will know better than you or me what's going to be what you most need. So if you feel something if you feel drawn to something when you're looking at a picture, like that'll be her. That'll be her telling you. Okay, so that's all we got for right now. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.